Hey there, welcome to Grand Point Church. Our mission is to help as many people as possible take their next steps to find and follow Jesus. Thanks for tuning into the message.
So all the way back in 1967, there was a movie release called Cool Hand Luke. Anybody remember Cool Hand Luke? You do? How many of you weren't even born in 1967? Let me just kind of look at this. Wow. Okay, so I'm not expecting you to remember this at all. Cool Hand Luke was about this mild-mannered, kind of laid-back Southern guy by the name of Luke. And he was put into prison, out into a rural prison, and he was known a little bit for his inconformity, like he didn't conform really well in prison. And on one particular occasion, it was the prison guard or the prison warden thought that Luke had talked back to him. And so he roughed him up a little bit and just began to punch him around a little bit. And pretty soon Luke was down on the ground. And then the prison warden looks down at the ground at Luke, looks up at all the prisoners. And then he said, "What we have here is a failure of communication." And failure of communication perhaps happened in his talking back or misunderstanding. But failure of communication happens in prisons, happens in organizations. It happens in almost every relationship that you're in, even a marriage relationship. Failure of communication. Now, failure of communication occurs in one of two ways. Number one, it simply is you're not communicating at all. The second way a failure of communication occurs is if you're communicating on the basis of false assumptions. So the other night, Penny came out of the bedroom. She was all dressed up, and she asked the question, "Do you like my dress?" Guys, let me just tell you, this is a major opportunity for failure of communication. Right. In addition to where you might spend the rest of your night or how you'll spend the rest of the night, your answer could lead to assumptions. See, if I would say, it really doesn't look good on you, she assumes that I'm saying she doesn't look good in that dress. See, it's no longer now about the dress that doesn't look good on her. She assumes that I'm saying she doesn't look good in the dress, and that's a big difference. I'll let you guess about my outcome on that whole thing. Actually, I think I did quite well with that. But see, sometimes we say things or we open things up where there's the allowance for assumptions to be made. And it's not the right communication. There's some great assumptions. The failure of communication actually happened in the book of Joshua, chapter 22 or 23, which is where we'll be tonight. If you have your Bibles, want to follow along on the screen, I'll tell you a little bit about this. But let me first of all do a little review for those of you that maybe are new and aren't quite up to date on this series. Let me do a little review, and then we'll look at the communication problem. The land of Israel has now been divided by lot into the 12 tribes of Israel. Get a little map up here. So you can see this. Here's the Dead Sea, and then the Jordan River goes up through there, connects to the Sea of Galilee. And so the tribes are coming in on this side from the east, and they're to cross over the Jordan River into the land of Canaan. Everything on this side of the Dead Sea. This is the promised land. But everyone was there except for the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and all the way there in the north, the East Manasseh, the half-tribe of Manasseh. They did not want to cross the Jordan River. They loved the land where it was. When they got to the Jordan River, the land was just beautiful. It was great pasture land, and they're like, "Can we just stay here?" That wasn't God's full intent for them, but God allowed it. Sometimes we don't go all in for God. God allows us to stay where we are. There's always repercussions to that. But 2.5 tribes decided to stay on this side of the Jordan. Now, Joshua was leading them at this point, and he said to Reuben and Gad and Manasseh, "Listen, you guys can stay here in the east with one exception. When we cross over, when all the other tribes cross over the Jordan to claim the promised land, the land of Canaan, we want you to go along with us to conquer all those towns over there, to drive out all those inhabitants. And when all of that is done, then you can come back to where your tents are pitched over here with their families." And so that's what was agreed on. They all agreed to that. And that's exactly what happened. Now, by chapter 22, the fighting in the land is over. Everything on this side of my map just disappeared. Everything on this side has been conquered, and they're now settling in or are allowed to go back to their land. The inhabitants of the land are defeated. The land is at rest. It took 7 years for the Israelites to conquer the land, but now it's done. You might remember the first one was Jericho, and then it was town after town after town, till all of these on the west side of the Jordan were conquered. 7 years it took to do that. Now, Joshua chapter 22, verse 1 says, at that time, Joshua summoned the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh and said to them, now listen to this. This is awesome. He said to them, you have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I have commanded you. You have not forsaken your brothers these many days, 7 years, down to this day, but have been careful to keep the charge of the Lord your God. That has to be one of the greatest testimonies that I've ever heard about someone's life. But then again, that's the people of God. People of God do what people of God do, right? They keep the law. They obey the Lord. It has to be one of the greatest testimonies. People of God act like people of God. Therefore, they're careful to keep the charge of the Lord their God. This is all about obedience. Obedience to God proves that you have a relationship with God. Obedience to God does not produce a relationship with God. It simply proves a relationship with God. In other words, it is not the good things that you do that create a relationship with God. It is everything that God had done and you accepting what God did that gives you that relationship. We had to have several reminders of that last week when I was meeting with people for baptism. Some people think that maybe baptism was something that was going to get them closer to God, have them please God a little bit more with this action. And we had to say, no. Baptism does not save you. Jesus does. Baptism is only the outward expression of something that happened inwardly. So obedience is what happens because of a relationship with God. It does not produce a relationship with God. I want you to make sure that you get that, because that's exactly what we see here with these tribes. Jesus even said in John chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. That's just what people do who love the Lord. Now, I want you to know, just so this isn't like out of your reach, right? I want you to know this. We're not called to follow the Lord perfectly. None of us will, but we are called to follow the Lord obediently. And that might just be the hardest part of the Christian life. It's not hard to create enthusiasm. It's not hard to get our emotions stirred up through some great worship service or some great song or by some preacher who paces across the stage and yells real loud and pounds the pulpit and says a lot of good things, right? It's easy for us to get all excited and enthused about things like that. It is not hard to create emotion. It's not hard to create enthusiasm, but obeying the Lord is a totally different category, isn't it? Sometimes it's harder to obey than it is just to get all excited. See, Eugene Peterson says it this way. He says, your love for God is a long obedience in the same direction. It's following the Lord faithfully, day after day after day, week after week, month after year after year, like the Israelites did, keeping the charge that the Lord had made to them. It's not easy taking 7 years of your life away from your family, helping some dudes on the other side of the river settle their land. All the while, their families and their kids were back here on the eastern side of the Jordan. They're over here helping the other guys conquer the land for 7 years. But they were faithful. They were faithful. They did everything that the Lord commanded them. Obedience proves that you have a relationship with God. Now, verse 4, it says, and now the Lord your God has given rest to your brothers, as he promised them. Therefore, turn and go to your tents in the land where your possession lies, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. In other words, he's saying, okay, guys, you can now go back. You can go home. Your job here on the west is done. Go back to the east. Cross over the Jordan again and be with your families. Verse 5, only be very careful to observe the commandments and the law that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, to love the Lord your God and to walk in all his ways and to keep his commandments and to cling to him and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. So Joshua blessed them and sent them away, and they went to their tents. But they went, I can guarantee you, they went with these words in their minds: obey God, love God, walk in his ways, keep his commandments, cling to him, and serve him. That's what Joshua commanded. He gave them this whole list before they went. No doubt as they're going, all those commandments are ringing in their ears. Every parent knows what it's like when your child leaves home. Your child packs up the car, leaves for college. When your son, your daughter are deployed and they're going. Or when they choose just to move out and go live with a friend someplace. Every parent knows what that's like because you almost want to give them the list, don't you? You want to give them the list. I remember clearly the day when my friend and I decided we're just going to go to Alaska for some adventure. We were 18 years old. It was on March 27th, 1979. You know what happened the day after that? 3 Mile Island kind of happened. So we have this big sign in the back of our truck. I bought this Dodge Power Wagon truck that got 8 miles to the gallon. And when it came to oil, it was almost the same equation. It was not a good plan, but we loaded this truck with our possessions, put a big sign in the back that said Alaska or bust, right? And we take off across the U.S. on our way to Alaska. Every state that we get in, people thought that we're just running away from the 3 Mile Island disaster. We didn't even know it happened. But we're going to Alaska. But I'll never forget the day that we left. We're all gathered in my driveway. The truck was loaded. It was pointed in the direction. Sign was on the back. Our parents were there. Siblings were there. I know I didn't think about it then, but now that when I think back on that, I can only imagine the concerned look on our parents' faces and probably even a deeper concern in their hearts. Like, what is this trip going to do to these guys? We're 18 years old. We're just out on an adventure, just driving and hoping we get to find something to do in Alaska, which we did. But we drove all the way to Alaska. But their hearts were wondering what this trip and what the environment would do to us, right? Rightful concern. Every Christian parent has that mixture of excitement and sadness when they see their child drive away. And the sadness is rooted in the question, will my child drift from the Lord? What will this college teach them? What will this environment do to them? What will this friend that they're going to live with do to their influence? Will they drift away from the Lord? See, that same feeling must have been in Joshua's mind as he sees 2.5 tribes go away to be separated by the geographical boundary of the Jordan River. No longer would they have easy access to each other. Obviously, Joshua wants the best for them. And so he gives them this string of commands as they leave: obey God, love God, walk in his ways, keep his commandments, cling to him, serve him. Not a bad litany of commandments, is it? And so he sends them away with that. And so when Joshua, verse 7, when Joshua sent them away to their homes and blessed them, he said to them, now go back to your tents with much wealth and with very much livestock, with silver, gold, bronze, iron, and with much clothing. Divide the spoil of your enemies with your brothers. So the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh returned home, parting from the people of Israel at Shiloh. I want you to keep in mind that Shiloh was the place of worship for the Israelites. Shiloh was where the temple was, or where the tabernacle was. It's where the altar was. It's where they offered incense to the Lord. Shiloh is where they worshiped. So they're parting from the people of Israel at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan, and they're going to the land of Gilead, their own land, of which they had possessed themselves by command of the Lord through Moses. And when they came to the region of the Jordan that is in the land of Canaan, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh built there an altar by the Jordan, an altar of imposing size. This literally means an altar great enough to the sight that is massive enough to be seen from a distance. Now, the Jordan River was about 100 feet wide during normal stage and about 2 miles wide during flood stage. But either way, whether it was 100 feet or 2 miles, an altar of imposing stature could be seen. I don't know if you remember, on the Scotland campus, there used to be this huge water tower. And when we moved here, that water tower was there. And we would always tell people where we live by saying, you drive down 81 South, when you pass the Scotland exit, just look to your right, and when you see that big imposing water tower, our house is right across the street from that. And that was at least 2 miles. So if they built this huge altar of imposing size, it was visible, no doubt, from the east side of the Jordan and also from the west. However, not everyone saw it, but everyone heard about it. Here's why we know that. Chapter 22, verse 11, they just built this altar of imposing size, and verse 11 says, and the people of Israel heard it said. They heard it said. Oh, this is what you call hearsay. It's what you call hearsay. Now, a noun, according to hearsay, as a noun, according to dictionary.com, is defined as unverified, unofficial information gained or acquired from another and not part of one's direct knowledge. Hearsay happens when someone comes up to you and says, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Did you hear about this? Do you hear about what they're doing over there? Do you hear about what they're doing at Grand Point? Right? It's hearsay. It's not firsthand information, but it's somebody just saying something that they think you would like to hear. And a lot of times it's juicy gossip. Juicy gossip. That does not apply to anyone here. I know that. But other people do that, right? They talk about people. And when we listen to what's being said, because we like listening to that stuff, and when we listen to what's being said, we form all kinds of opinions and beliefs and behaviors on the basis of what we heard. So the people of Israel heard it said. They heard it said, verse 12, behold, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh have built an altar at the frontier of the land of Canaan in the region about the Jordan, on the side that belongs to the people of Israel. Like they built this altar in the land of Canaan before they crossed over. And when the people, here it is again, verse 12, and when the people of Israel heard of it, the whole assembly of the people of Israel gathered at Shiloh to make war against them. Now I want you to see this. The only reason why Israel wanted to make war against the 2.5 tribes is because of what they heard. There will be times when you literally despise someone, you dislike someone, or you hate someone, and you have absolutely no reason to do that. The only reason you feel that way about that person is because somebody said something about somebody that you weren't even there for, right? But you formed an opinion. You formed this dislike and this hatred toward them. But because of what you heard, you're ready to make war with someone. Wonder how many wars have been started by hearsay. You just heard something. How many arguments or trouble in your own house was just started by hearsay? Somebody said this, or somebody, you know how that goes. Hearsay is not even admissible in the court of law because you can't give testimony about something that you've just heard. You can't testify about from secondhand information. And so the Israelites are ready to engage their brothers in war with the guys that they just spent 7 years with, conquering the land of Canaan. Now they're ready to go to war against them. Now, I want to clear this up a little bit because in addition to making this judgment based on hearsay, before they knew the facts, that was one of the things. I'll tell you a little bit about the other side of this in just a moment. But sometimes in following God, your best intentions will be misunderstood. And when they're misunderstood, then people maybe want to go to war against you, or they want to come at you for something. Assumption is the absolute lowest form. Assumption is the absolute lowest form of communication, right? You're communicating on the basis of assumptions rather than on facts. Pastor Gary Hamrick says it this way. He says, assumption leads to accusation. And it happened. Verse 13. Then the people of Israel sent to the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh in the land of Gilead. They sent Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, and with him 10 chiefs, one from each of the tribal families of Israel, every one of them the head of a family among the clans of Israel. They're bringing up the heavy hitters, and they're sending them out to these 2.5 tribes to figure out why they're building this altar or to begin making war against them. And they came to the people of Reuben, the people of Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh in the land of Gilead, and they said to them, thus says the whole congregation of the Lord. Everybody's talking. Everybody's saying this. Thus says the whole congregation of the Lord, what is this breach of faith that you have committed against the God of Israel in turning away this day from following the Lord by building yourselves an altar this day in rebellion against the Lord? Have we not had enough of the sin of Peor, from which even yet we've not cleansed ourselves, and from which there came a plague among the congregation of the Lord, that you too must turn away this day from following the Lord? And if you too rebel against the Lord today, then tomorrow he will be angry with the whole congregation of Israel. But now, if the land of your possession is unclean, pass over into the Lord's land where the Lord's tabernacle stands, and take for yourselves a possession among us. Only do not rebel against the Lord or make us as rebels by building for yourself an altar other than the altar of the Lord our God. And they continue. Did not Achan, the son of Zerach, break faith in the matter of devoted things? And wrath fell upon all the congregation of Israel, and he did not perish alone for his iniquity. And they're unleashing all of these examples. Did you see what just happened? The congregation of Israel thinks that the eastern tribes abandoned the worship of God, which at this time was at the tabernacle of Shiloh. Right? They assumed that because there was another altar that was being built, that now they were worshiping some other gods. Now, let me just jump on their side for a moment, because here's what God said. When God sent the Israelites in to conquer these lands, he said, destroy the inhabitants of it. Destroy their gods. Tear down their altars. See, it was the pagans who had multiple altars to their gods all throughout the land. Israel only had one altar because they only had one God. And that altar was at Shiloh. So these Israelites who are now settled in the land heard that there was another altar that was being built, yes, by their own brothers, but because they were set to follow the Lord and cleanse the land from the altars, they may have been saying, hey, we're going to go to war against them, not because we do not like them, not because of hearsay, but because they built this altar that is in violation to Israel's one and only God. So that's possible. That was the reason they were going to make war against them. In fact, I'm thinking that was it. It wasn't any other reason. It wasn't for any other reason other than they wanted to make sure that they served this one God. But assumption leads to accusation. So they heard about an altar. They thought now that it was that they assumed that they were worshiping some other God. So they came with a whole list of accusations. And the Israelites are standing here, the 2.5 tribes are standing there, listening to Phinehas and his 10 chiefs just go off on them. I mean, it's over and over again, verse after verse, example after example of everything that they're doing wrong. They're standing there listening. And then when Phinehas finally took a breath and there was a break in the accusations, verse 21, then the people of Reuben and the people of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh said in answer to the heads of the families of Israel. They're going to respond to this. And verse 22 says, the mighty one, God the Lord, the mighty one, God the Lord, he knows. And let Israel itself know. If we built this altar in rebellion or in breach of faith against the Lord, yes, do not spare us today. Wipe us out. Clean up the land. Don't spare us for building an altar to turn away from following the Lord. Or if we did so to offer burnt offerings or grain offerings or peace offerings on it, may the Lord himself take vengeance. Well, verse 24, look, no, that's not why we built this altar. We didn't build this altar because we want to offer sacrifices to another God. We're not leaving that. We're not abandoning the Lord. We're still following him. They're saying, no, we did it from fear that in time to come, your children might say to our children, what have you to do with the Lord, the God of Israel? For the God has made the Jordan a boundary between us and you people of Reuben and the people of Gad. And they're afraid that they're going to come one day and say, you have no portion in the Lord. So your children might make our children cease to worship the Lord. Therefore, we said, let us build an altar, not for burnt offerings, not for sacrifice, but to be a witness. To be a witness between us and you and between our generations after us, that we do perform the service of the Lord in his presence with our burnt offerings and sacrifices and peace offerings. So your children will not say to our children in time to come, you have no portion in the Lord. And we thought, if this should be said to us or to our descendants in time to come, we should say, behold the copy of the altar of the Lord which our fathers made, not for burnt offerings, not for sacrifice, but to be a witness between you and us. Far be it from us that we should rebel against the Lord and turn away this day from following the Lord by building an altar for burnt offerings. No way would we do that. That's not what this was about. So let me kind of summarize what just happened. That was a lot of text. But this altar was only for a witness between the two groups of people. It was a witness. See, Gad and Manasseh and Ephraim, they had the foresight of what might happen in the next generation. And they were like, no, we want this altar to serve as a lasting witness, as a memorial. Kind of like the memorial that was set up after they crossed the Jordan River. We want these stones to be put up so that whenever our kids ask, what do these stones mean? We can tell them about the goodness of God. That's all that this altar was. It was an altar that was a witness between the two groups. And so they said, let's build this altar to remember our unity. So now Phinehas and his 10 chiefs and these guys that came and unloaded on these guys are now like, oh, okay. So we thought the altar was for worship. We didn't know it was a memorial. See, within this whole story, there's some great lessons for us. Some very practical ones that I'll give to you, but then there's one big one that I want to leave with you tonight. Some of the secondary lessons I think that we learn from this are always give the benefit of the doubt before you jump to conclusions. Right? We all know that. Always give the benefit of the doubt before you jump to conclusions. So many reputations and people have been destroyed because people jump to conclusions. You make assumptions and you fire off at them. You don't have all the facts. You don't know the truth. So always give the benefit of the doubt before you jump to conclusions, before you go make war with someone. Remember also, there's two sides to a story. It's a terrible thing to ruin someone's character or reputation based on lies or hearsay. And another lesson is that we must be truth seekers and truth tellers. So when Phinehas and his team got the truth, they went back to the Israelites, back to Shiloh, and they corrected the assumptions. They made it right. Verse 34, the people of Reuben and the people of Gad called the altar a witness. For they said, it is a witness between us and between us that the Lord is God. Now, here's the greater lesson that I want you to take from this. See, when Reuben and Gad and Manasseh crossed over the border into the homeland with all the spoils of war, They were not about to allow the clutter of victory to distract them from their true priorities. Sometimes your worst enemy is your past success. And when you rest on your successes in the past and everything that you have done comes back sometimes to haunt you. They weren't about to do this. They weren't about to let their victories take them away from following the Lord. They took very seriously the exhortation of Joshua, who said, only carefully obey the command and instruction that Moses, the Lord's servant, gave you to love the Lord your God, walk in his ways, keep his commands, cling to him, and serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. It's like the first and greatest commandment brought right back up here, isn't it? So in their zeal, they built this altar. They raised this Ebenezer. Built this altar, an altar of witness as a reminder to future generations that that the Lord is God. Now Israel came along and they mistakenly took offense at Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, believing they built this altar of idolatry. But it was an altar of memorial. The three tribes established on the other side of the Jordan could have been offended, highly offended by all these allegations, but they received the rebuke from their brothers with great grace, great patience. At least that's how I read it. There was no war coming back at them, no yelling back at them. They just took it and then graciously corrected them. Graciously corrected them. Communication leads to clarification, right? So now they're communicating what this was all about, and things are starting to become clear. God's people blessed him, celebrated his presence among them. This altar erected by the Reubens and the Gadites was named for its intended purpose. It was to be a witness that the Lord is God. Now, let me just close with this. I think this altar of witness is for us also. Perhaps in a way that we will never forget who God is. There has to be an altar of witness somewhere in our lives, somewhere in our living that reminds us again, over and over again, of who God is, so that we would not turn away from God to worship idolatry. See, the zeal of Israel for the glory of God and for the preservation of true worship is to be the defining pursuit of our lives. It's exactly what Chris said at the introduction of that last song, right? Worship is our main goal. That's what we're created for. You and I are created to worship. And that's exactly what this altar of witness was for. The zeal of Israel for the glory of God and the preservation of true worship at Shiloh. That one place, for that one altar, for one God. Not all these other gods that we sometimes worship and go after and pursue. No, it was to bring us back to this one God. We need a witness to do that. Now, although we no longer use altars, I believe we can still incorporate rhythms of remembrance into our spiritual practices. And maybe it is at times coming to an altar, occasionally to reset. Remind yourself of the salvation experience that you once had, but I think your altar is more like this. Someplace in your home, in your office, someplace, I don't care where it is, you need to have a time where you sit, where you kneel, where you come before the Lord at an altar of remembrance, reminding yourself every single day that God is the Lord, that the Lord is God, and He's the only one that you will rightly serve that day. Yes, there's every day that we wake up, there's so many other things that we want to serve, isn't there? So many other places to go, things that we put our allegiance to, ways that we invest in all that. So many distractions in this world. But I believe our altar would be every single day sitting at a moment with the Word of God, reminding yourself again that the Lord is God and He's the one that you're going to serve this day. May that be the altar of witness. So every single day, there's a witness somewhere to the fact that the Lord is God and he's the only one that we can serve. And just so I don't have a failure of communication with you, let me leave you with these words tonight, coming right from Joshua, coming from the Lord. Obey God, love God, walk in his ways, keep his commandments, cling to him, and serve him. Serve him. That's what will get you rest. That's what will get you into the land that God has prepared for you. That's what will make your life everything that God created you to be, everything that God intended for you. Obey God, love him, keep his commands, walk in his ways, cling to him, serve him. It's the only God that will get you there. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you for this. I know it was a lot of text here in this chapter 22. Kind of worked through it rather quickly, but I thank you for the big lesson that you taught the Israelites that day when they had this huge misunderstanding, this failure of communication, even to the point where they wanted to go to war against their brothers. But God, I thank you that in the communication there was clarity. Their hearts were still right. They were still together. They were still all about this one God. They just wanted a witness. They wanted an altar of remembrance. God, how we need that as well. Because waking up, going about our days, living in this world, man, there's so many things that occupy our minds, so many things that grab our attention. God, help us to erect that altar, that Ebenezer, that we can come to every single day of our lives and be reminded that you are our God and you're the only one. You're the only one that will make life work for us. God, so tonight as we end this service, we submit ourselves to you and we declare our love for you and just worship you and determine to walk in your ways. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thanks for listening to the week's message. We'd love to connect with you on social media, so give us a follow and be sure to check out our website, grandpoint.church/nextsteps.